Top 10 ways to extreme anti-aging and looking younger. Aging is such a charged topic because nobody wants to die early and yet nobody wants to grow old. And we don't believe that it's possible to live for a really long time without suffering, because we see all these people as they age, they have all these ailments and they're on medication and they require surgeries and they're being wheeled around and they spend several years in bed, and that's certainly not what we want. So in this video, we're going to show you how we can have the best of both worlds, how we can stick around for a long time and how we can enjoy it. We're going to talk about how to prolong vitality. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. When I did a search on anti-aging, I was shocked by what I found, because almost every search result that showed up was about wrinkle creams and pills and cosmetic tips, beauty tips. Are we really that superficial? And I'm not saying that that stuff isn't important, but I mean, it's not the most important thing. It's not what we're really all about. If I gave you the choice between looking really young when you were 80, but having your mind gone, or looking 80 when you're 80 and having a sharp mind, which one would you choose? And I really hope that you would choose the sharp mind. But the good news is that you actually don't have to choose between the two, because if you start understanding how the body works, then you can slow down both. I'm going to teach you 10 ways to supercharge your anti-aging. But we're not just going to list them. As usual, we're going to talk about the mechanisms that you truly get it. And then, as a thank you for watching all the way through, I'm going to get you a bonus at the end that's going to make it even more worth it. In this video, I'm going to teach you 10 ways to supercharge your anti-aging. But I know that you really want to learn this. I'm not just going to list the things. I'm going to explain how everything works so that you can put it into the bigger picture. And make sure you stay to the end, because I'm going to give you a bonus that's going to tie it all together for you. Aging is the loss of function. It simply means that some of the things that used to work when we were younger, they don't work so well anymore. And what are those things? What are the things that we're trying to sustain? Well, the first thing is we want to make energy. The healthier we are, the better our ability to make energy. Dead things can't make energy, live things can make energy, healthy things make a lot of energy. And some of that energy is used to generate signals, because your ability to move and think and process and regulate and maintain balance and homeostasis all depends on how well the signals work. The better the signals are processing, the healthier you are. The more the signals start to get pushed out of balance, the more diseases and the more problems you start to get. And the third critical thing is that we want to be able to maintain and repair cells. And especially we want to be able to maintain and repair the DNA, because as a cell wears out, it can make a replica of itself, but the quality of the new cell depends on the quality of the DNA. So if the DNA can repair itself, then the next cell will be of a good quality. Whereas if the DNA gets damaged, then that next generation of cells are going to wear out and die and won't be able to propagate anymore. And when we're talking about aging and anti-aging and function, we're really mostly talking about the brain, because the brain is what manages all of these signals. It generates a lot of energy, it receives signals, it processes signals. It's what makes this thing work. All right? So even though all the other organs are super important and all the organs support and help each other function, it's really the brain that we're mostly concerned with. So what I'm going to talk about does apply to every organ, but primarily the brain, because if you have a healthy brain, it's going to help keep the the other organs healthy as well. Now, there's been a lot of exciting research on aging, and recently, for the first time, they believe that they're starting to really understand what aging is, what the mechanism is. And once they figure some of these things out, then we may be able to age slower and eventually maybe not at all. And it turns out that they believe that aging is programmed, okay? That every species has a certain length, that you could take a mouse and instead of their average 2-year lifespan, you can help them live 3 years, but you can't make it live 100 years. And same thing with humans right now. We can do a lot of things to get beyond the 80-year average, and we could make that 120-year average, but as we are programmed right now, we're not going to live to 1,000. So part of this has to do with programming. But what's exciting is that there's this theory that relates to being on top of the food chain. And now everyone thinks that humans are on top of the food chain, which we sort of are, but that's a very, very recent thing. For the vast majority, and when we're talking hundreds of thousands or even millions of years, we have been somewhere in the middle. A mouse is pretty much at the bottom of the food chain, but there are some animals who are at the top of the food chain, like predator birds and whales. And there are some species of whales that actually live to about an average of 200 years. So they believe that there's some reason behind the programming of how long we're going to live, the programmed time of death. And the purpose of life is to be able to procreate, to be able to pass on your genome to another generation so that it can evolve through you, through that next generation. So in order for that to happen, you only need to stick around long enough to duplicate your genome, to pass on your genes, and to stick around long enough to raise it and make sure that it's safe. So mice, they can reproduce very, very quickly and they have to, because they may not stick around too long. There may be a bird or there may be something else that comes to eat it. So it doesn't expect to be around long, and because of that, nature has favored it to pass on its genes very quickly. And that's about what humans have done as well. And as we have conquered most of the reasons we died, like starvation and infection and wild animals and accidents, now we're in a different position to live longer. But that's, like I said, it's been very recent. But what they're thinking based on this theory is that humans in the next few million years will probably develop an average lifespan of 200 years or more. But until then, we have to make the best of what we have. So our goal at this point is just to make our program, our current program, last as long as possible. And therefore we have to understand, what is it that interferes? If aging is loss of function and health is the opposite, if health is function and aging is the loss of function, what is it that creates the loss of function? Well, in my experience, there's 3 general categories. And the first is anything that does damage. And we call these toxins or interference. Anything that disturbs the balance and the longevity and the function of a cell, it does damage and will shorten the lifespan. We have things like deficiencies. That means that the cell, in order to perform that function, it needs to have certain things, and if it doesn't get those, then it can't perform those functions. That's a deficiency. And then we have degeneration, which means that basically use it or lose it. So let's take these one at a time. The most common interference, toxins, the things that do damage today that I see are metal toxicity, chemical toxicity, because they can interfere in very small dosages. They get stuck in the body, they get stuck in metabolic pathways and in synapses, and they interfere with what the body is trying to do. And then we have food sensitivities, which are incredibly common. When we are stressed, when we are deficient, then we lose the ability to completely break down food, and now that food starts creating problems. It starts creating inflammation and autoimmune reactions and leaky gut and so forth. Also, electromagnetic fields are it's a man-made thing. We haven't had that for very long, but your body is an electromagnetic field, and when you put it in the presence of other electromagnetic fields, like wiring in the house and computers and cell phones and Wi-Fi routers and Bluetooth transmitters, then these man-made EMFs push on your body's energy field, on your body's communication. And even if you don't feel it, it's a stress, and for some people it can be devastating. Interference can also happen from scars. So if you have a scar somewhere on your skin, that skin has changed its properties. It's gone from being very flexible and pliable and having a regular fiber pattern to having a stiffened and random fiber pattern. And we have acupuncture energy. We have meridians where energy is flowing in these meridians, and wherever a scar cuts across a meridian, then that flow of energy is going to change. Your body's communication ability is going to be challenged. We have videos on a lot of these different things. We'll give you some links at the end. Inflammation is from a variety of different reasons. One is sugar, another is allergens. Those are the primary ones, and inflammation will interfere. Stress will interfere because your body's ability to maintain and repair is managed by your parasympathetic nervous system. And when you have a stress response, you are activating your sympathetic nervous system, your fight-flight system, which will turn off, which will decrease the activity of your parasympathetic nervous system, your feed-breed. So anytime you're stressed, you will reduce the amount of maintenance and repair in your cells. And of course, we have to include the number one source of toxicity today, because sugar, which drives insulin is a storage hormone, and in doing that, we are constantly congesting. When the body is in a storage mode, it never fully pulls things out. So when we're always in the process of packing things in, part of the things we're going to be packing in are fat, of course, but also we're going to pack in these toxins. We're not going to give the body a chance to really clean house. All right, so deficiencies. What are the things that the cell needs? Well, it has to have, first of all, raw materials. When we want to maintain and repair, we need to have raw materials. And the brain is mostly fat, and the brain and its cell membranes, the fat that it consists of is mostly something called DHA, which we get in fish oil. The other most common component of the brain is cholesterol. So I'm not saying that you have to eat a lot of extra cholesterol. You don't have to be afraid of it, but your body will make the cholesterol that it needs if you just eat good, varied food. However, if you are on statin drugs, if you are artificially attempting to reduce your cholesterol significantly, then that might be making it very difficult for your brain to get the necessary raw materials to maintain and repair. Next, the cell needs fuel. In order to make energy and generate signals, we got to have some fuel. And the two fuels for the brain is glucose and ketones. And the glucose is very deceiving, because it turns out that if you try to add a bunch of glucose, then what you're doing is you're creating high and low. You're creating alternating high and low blood sugars. And the way the brain works, it likes the fuel, it likes the blood glucose to be kind of low and to stay stable. That's the ideal situation for the brain. It loves when it's somewhere between 75 to 85 milligrams per deciliter. So when we talk about fuel and glucose, we're not talking about adding a bunch of extra, because that is going to make it worse. That is going to create insulin resistance, and it's going to starve the brain of glucose in the long run. So if anything, we want to start focusing more on situations that create ketones. The glucose we don't have to worry about, because we're going to make enough no matter what. If we eat some vegetables and we eat some meat and we even eat fat, all those things have resources. They have precursors that the body can turn into glucose. And ketones we make by burning fat. So by eating more fat, by eating good healthy fat, natural fats that haven't been processed by humans and destroyed and altered, they are stable and they're a good source of fuel, so the body can make ketones out of them. It's a common fallacy that the brain only runs on glucose, because when we are fasting, then we're in ketosis. When we're fat adapted, then the brain can actually run up to 75% on ketones. So the brain has two fuels, not one. The next thing we can be deficient in is hormones, because in order for the brain to repair itself, in order for the brain to repair cells, but also, more importantly, for the brain to reshape itself through neuroplasticity, to make new synapses, to maintain our ability to learn at any age, we need to make new synapses. That's how you can learn. Even at the age of 100, you can learn new skills. You can get a new computer or a new cell phone or a new gadget, and you can learn how to use it. The only way that happens is if you can make new synapses, if you can rewire your brain. But guess what? That rewiring needs to have human growth hormone and something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Synapses can't happen without those, but in the presence of a lot of those two hormones, the brain can even make new cells. And the third main cause of aging is degeneration. So degeneration can be part of not having interference and not having the resources, but it is also use it or lose it. So everybody understands that principle at some level. We understand that if you do some weightlifting, then you're going to build bigger muscles. If you break an arm and you put it in a cast, then after a couple of months, that muscle atrophies, it shrinks because you're not using it. Use it or lose it. And this is because the brain is really smart. Your body is really smart. It wants to survive. It wants to allocate the resources where they're used the most. So if you put your arm in a cast and you work out the other arm, now your body is going to build that muscle because you're using it. It's going to allocate resources to maintain and repair the part you're using. But why would it waste resources maintaining something that you don't use? So use it or lose it is true for muscles, but it's equally true or even more true for the brain. And when the brain has a lot of signals to process, when it gets a lot of energy, when it gets a lot of hormones to make new synapses, then the brain thrives and it can stay young and function for a very, very long time. But first, I just want to talk about how we often think about things the wrong way, because we're brought up in a healthcare system that's really a sick care system, and we're so used to treating the symptom that we really have to practice thinking another way. So let's say that you have a problem. Let's say that you have fatigue. Now, what's the cause of that fatigue? If we start understanding what we just talked about, then the cause of the fatigue is toxicity, deficiency, and degeneration. That's the cause. The reason you're fatigued is you can't make enough energy because something is missing or something's interfering, or you have degenerated from lack of use. Use it or lose it. Now, what would most people do if they have fatigue? Well, Fatigue is very common, and there's a reason there's a multi-billion-dollar industry of coffee and energy drinks and other stimulants. So we take a stimulant. But a stimulant is not the solution. It's not going to reverse the cause. It's not going to undo the toxicity and the deficiency and the degeneration. The drink isn't adding anything that you actually need to make energy. It's just like cracking a whip on your nervous system. It is like giving you a jolt so you can go just a little bit longer, like the Energizer Bunny, but it doesn't make you any healthier. It doesn't make you any younger. It doesn't help you generate any more energy or signals. So the solution is DRA. Detox, replenish, and activate. Okay, we'll get to that in just a moment. Now let's say you have some wrinkles. What's the cause of the wrinkles? Well, it would be toxicity, deficiency, and degeneration. Now, we're talking premature wrinkles, because wrinkles are inevitable. The way we're programmed, they're going to happen. But premature wrinkles are caused by toxicity, deficiency, and degeneration. Is the solution a cream? I'm not opposed to cream. We even sell some really good ones in our office, but it's not the solution to aging. All right? First, you address the cellular component, and then you can help your skin look a little better. So again, the solution is detox, replenish, and activate. Now, what if you get old, weak, and frail? The cause is the same, toxicity, deficiency, degeneration, but what's our typical solution? Well, it's to make life easy for people. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but there are electric scooters everywhere. Every store has electric scooters now. And I'm not making fun of people who need them. I'm not putting them down at all. I think it's wonderful that we live in a society that more and more makes life comfortable and convenient for people. But when we see that as a solution, oh, I don't have to worry about anything, or I don't have to learn how to reverse anything, and we just rely on this, then that's a problem. When we go to our local supermarket and half of the parking lots are for handicapped people, that's a courtesy, but it's a sign that we're going the wrong way. We're looking at things the wrong way. Again, the solution at any age is detox, replenish, and activate. So now we're going to dive into the 10 ways that you want to learn about. So hunker down and take notes. But actually, that's sort of a joke, because this is a video, so you don't have to take notes, because you can watch this over and over for free. The first thing is detox. How do you do that? And there's a lot of misconceptions that people say that, oh, don't worry about detox. It's a fallacy. It's a myth. Your body has a natural detoxification system, which is true. You have a liver, you have a bowel, you have kidneys, you have lungs, you have skin. They all get rid of toxins, but they can't keep up because we have more toxins than ever before. And in my office, that's the first thing that we address. We spend the majority of our effort for several weeks or even months just helping people get over the stuff that is interfering. Now, the number one thing that's interfering, the number one toxicity, again, sugar made it to the number one spot on the list. Okay? If you just change one thing, take sugar out of your life. So when we talk about detox, there's different steps. First, you want to stop putting the bad stuff in. Then you want to start pulling the bad stuff out. And then you want to start putting some good stuff in. I know that sounds simple, but sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. Number 2 on the list is allergens. And today there's hardly anybody who isn't allergic to something. Now there's a full-blown antibody allergy, and then there's a lesser sensitivity where there's not necessarily an antibody, but where the body is still reacting and there's inflammation created. There's an immune response. And the top two items that account for 95% of the problems are grains and processed dairy. So it's not any grain. Very few people react to things like rye and oats and barley, but wheat, especially modern wheat, is what people react to. And dairy, it's not necessarily all dairy, because a lot of people do well on raw dairy, on raw cheese, raw milk, yogurt, sour cream, fermented foods, but very, very few people can fully tolerate pasteurized milk. So if you are wanting to reduce your sensitivity reaction, the potential of inflammation from food, then start with wheat and pasteurized milk. So we said first we stop putting the bad stuff in, and that includes pesticides. So next, you want to do as much as you can to go organic. Not everyone can afford or find everything organic. Don't worry about it. Do the best you can. Take one step at a time and figure out which items are the most important to get organic. Things like berries, where you eat the skin and where they spray a lot. And other things where you peel them or where they don't use so much pesticide, it's not as big a deal. Number 4, now we start helping the body get rid of some stuff. So the first 3 are to stop putting bad stuff in. Now we start pulling things out. And the liver is your primary detoxification organ, and your liver loves green vegetables. Okay? They contain a lot of things that help cleanse. That's why a lot of vegans feel so good when they first start being vegans, because most people are toxic, and if you eat a lot of green vegetables, then you help the liver cleanse things out. That doesn't mean that everyone should be a vegan forever, but it could be a good thing to kind of get you going. So lots of leafy greens, and specifically some things like chlorella and cilantro. We use those a lot in my office to help detox metals. Then you can use certain things like resveratrol and turmeric, and the list goes on, for things that are natural anti-inflammatories that help calm down sensitivity responses. Number 5, we're continuing to pull things out, and one good way to do that is to sweat. And part of it is that, yes, you do sweat out some stuff through the skin, but even more so when you exercise or when you sit in a sauna, you also increase your circulation, especially peripheral circulation, those little capillaries where if you're sitting still, if you're a little chilly and you got cold hands, then that peripheral circulation never gets going. But if you're in a sauna or if you're exercising, and if you exercise long enough to where you get really, really warm extremities, now you know that you got that circulation going. And the part of that circulation is it's increasing the turnover. It's kind of flushing out everything that needs to get flushed out. So the body has a certain way of doing things, but if you circulate twice as much, it can do things twice as fast. Number 6, now we're into replenishing. We've stopped putting bad stuff in, we help get some bad stuff out. Now we got to put the good stuff in. And the number 1 thing that the brain is missing is DHA. 60% of the brain is fat, and 40% of that fat is DHA. It's a very, very long fatty acid. It stands for docosahexaenoic acid, which means it's 22 carbons long. It's an immense carbon molecule, fat molecule. And hexa means it's 6 times unsaturated. So it's like squiggly, like a worm basically. And that gives the cell membranes very specific properties. It allows the cell membranes to be flexible. It allows the cell membranes to be better at figuring out the difference between inside and outside of the cell, which has to do with signaling, and that's what cells do, and that's what the brain does especially. And most people don't get nearly enough DHA because we hardly eat fish anymore, And DHA is very, very sensitive to heat. So it's the little that we have in food gets destroyed by cooking. So most people would do well to find some good fish to eat on a regular basis, like salmon or sardines, some fatty fish. But if you can't find clean fish, or if you don't like fish, then you really do need to take a fish oil supplement. And if you don't want to eat fish at all, now you need to take an algae supplement. Now, algae can produce DHA, but it is more expensive. So if you want to sort of be strict with not eating fish, then you're going to spend just a little bit more, but you're going to still have to do that. DHA is absolutely necessary. Number 7 on the list is oxygen, O2. And when the body makes energy, when we say that it needs fuel, it needs glucose and ketones. But what allows the body to actually turn the fuel into energy is oxygen. Increasing oxygen can have tremendous benefits. Like we talked about increasing circulation, when the blood gets out to the periphery, to places where it doesn't go as much when we don't sweat and exercise, when that oxygen gets out there, it can perform miracles. And especially, same thing holds true for the brain, because when you can truly, fully perfuse the brain, when you can saturate the brain with oxygen, now it can really fire on all cylinders. And there's 2 primary ways of getting more oxygen in. One is exercise, and the other is oxygen therapy or hyperbaric chambers. So they can be pretty costly. You go someplace or you buy a tank and you increase the oxygen saturation or you increase the pressure, and now you're allowing the blood to get more saturated. You're just really sort of squeezing oxygen into the blood. But if you can't afford or don't have access to that, don't worry about it, because exercising or even just doing breathing exercises where you're filling your lungs and emptying your lungs just a little bit extra can be very beneficial for that. Number 8 on the replenishing list is catalysts. Catalysts are a little tiny molecule that participate in the conversion of fuel and oxygen into energy. Those are also known as vitamins and minerals. So primarily B vitamins. B1 is the main thing that people get deficient in, but you do want to get all the B vitamins. And your best source is going to be a whole food supplement or something like nutritional yeast. Don't go and get these mega doses of synthetic B vitamins that might help you just a little bit for a short term, but in the long run it's going to create more problems than it solves. And besides vitamins, the brain loves minerals. Minerals are necessary for signal transmission, and it has a generally calming effect on the brain because they help stabilize neural membranes. So the primary one for the brain is magnesium, but there's several others that are very important, like potassium, calcium, iodine, etc. So far, we have improved the conditions for the cells to function better. We've improved the environment, the circumstances for the cell. Now we have to do something with the cell. Now we have to activate it. Remember that if you don't use it, you lose it. Everything degenerates. If you don't activate it on a regular basis, if you don't put it to use, it has no reason for existing. So number 9, exercise. There is probably nothing better you can do for staying young and maintaining health than exercise. And there's there's 3 primary ways that it helps your body. The first is high intensity interval training. This is where you're challenging your body. You're taking exercise to an intensity level where your body is fearing the future. It's fearing tomorrow. It's saying, hey, I'm scared. If you're going to do this to me again tomorrow, I have to get better, right? And what it does then, it produces, if you scare your body, if you challenge your body a little bit, it's going to produce very large amounts of human growth hormone and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Why? Because those hormones, they do help build muscles, but they help build all tissues, and especially brain. So HIIT is primarily for hormones. Then you want to do some aerobic exercise. And this means you're going to keep your heart rate at about 120 to 130 or below so that you can breathe comfortably through your nose without huffing and puffing. Okay? HIIT, you're going to huff and puff. You're going to get out of breath. Your heart is going to beat through your chest. Aerobic, you don't want that to happen. You want to breathe comfortably. You want to exercise comfortably. And what you're doing here is you're increasing circulation for an extended period of time. You can keep up the aerobic for an hour or even 2, and during that time, you're doubling or tripling your circulation. So it's part of the detox more than anything. And then yoga, the third way, the third mechanism is yoga activates mechanoreceptors and stretch receptors and muscle spindle cells. These are little receptors that sit in all your tissues that send signals to the brain. And signals activate the brain. The purpose of the brain is to receive signals. If you give the brain more signals, it's going to grow stronger. And when you stretch and you activate motion and stretch receptors, now you are activating those signals. So there's 3 different mechanisms. It is hormones, it is detox circulation, and it is brain activation. Okay? HIIT will also produce a tremendous amount of brain activation because of how fast you're moving, but yoga, because it increases your range of motion, it gives you a flexible spine, it sets you up for a more long-term continuous production of signals in your everyday life. Number 10, start to meditate. Meditation is a very, very powerful way of calming your body. It's a very powerful way of undoing stress, and stress interferes with the maintenance and repair of your cells. So let's say that you're stressed most of the time. Now your body is in defense mode, maybe 70% of the time, and it's in repair mode maybe 30% of the time. Whereas if you start meditating, you're going to help the body get back to balance and do the appropriate amount of both. So those are the top 10 ways, but just like I promised you, there is a bonus. And I'm so proud of you for sticking around. That shows that you're really serious about taking care of yourself. So the bonus is intermittent fasting. And if there's one thing that you can do in addition to sugar and exercise that's just super simple, it is intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting is when you eat fewer meals, when you go longer between meals. And why is that so powerful? Because even though high-intensity interval training is challenging the body and you can increase your growth hormone by 700-800%, extended fasting can increase your growth hormone even more, as much as 2,000%. So if you really want to supercharge almost everything that we've talked about, then fasting will do that. And you get a twofold benefit. It's like 2 trump cards all at once. Not only will it increase growth hormone, the most powerful way, but it's also the most powerful way to reduce insulin. And insulin is a mitogenic hormone. Insulin will speed up aging. It'll make cells divide faster. Sugar and insulin will create virtually every one of the problems that we have talked about. And fasting is the most powerful way to reduce insulin, and at the same time you get the most of the best and the least of the worst. If you enjoyed this video, then you know that there's a lot of information to learn, and we have a whole library for you. We'll give you a list down below. But for right now, I think you should check out that video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.